That's why I'm successful. I got that dog. After 20 years of doing it, I still got that dog. I've not forgotten it. I've not forgotten that I was in an abandoned building. Got that dog.
Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're going to talk about aeromedical factors, specifically hypoxia. Really the goal for today is for you to have a knowledge base, be able to explain, identify what kind of hypoxia you're experiencing, whether it's yourself as a pilot or your passengers, and for you to really know what the effects are of hypoxia and have a good understanding of what it is. So I'm going to start off with the actual accident that happened in 1999. So a chartered Lear 35 was scheduled to fly from Orlando, Florida to Dallas, Texas. Early in the flight, the aircraft was climbing to its assigned altitude on autopilot, quickly lost cabin pressure, and all on board were incapacitated due to hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. So the aircraft continued on its westward, northwestern course, going all the way up to South Dakota. It flew for about 4 hours or 1,500 miles. It was intercepted by F-16s. Eventually running out of fuel, it crashed in South Dakota, and of course everyone died, unfortunately. Now, I'm pretty sure that all the passengers on board had already died before the crash, after being in flight for 4 hours and 1,500 miles without oxygen. It's pretty safe to say that they had already passed away, maybe 10 to 15 minutes after that cabin had depressurized, because just like drowning, you can't go more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes without oxygen. So that's the actual, real life situation. Unfortunately, 4 passengers on board passed away: PGA golfer, paint steward, and his agent. So, that's why it's important to know about hypoxia. So we're going to talk about what hypoxia is and the 4 different types of hypoxia. So we have hypoxic hypoxia, hypemic hypoxia, stagnant, and histotoxic hypoxia. So starting off with hypoxia, what does it mean? So hypoxia means reduced oxygen or not enough oxygen. Hypoxia can be caused by several factors, including an insufficient supply of oxygen, inadequate transportation of oxygen, and the inability of body tissues to use oxygen. So hypoxic hypoxia is a result of insufficient oxygen available to the lungs. Now this can be a blocked airway, whether you're choking or you're drowning, that would be hypoxic hypoxia. Now, in a pilot situation, hypoxia is a reduction in partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude, which is one of the most common examples. So we've all heard the saying that there's less air at higher altitudes. There's less oxygen is what they say, and it's partially true. Now, there's less oxygen at higher altitudes by volume, but not by percentage. And what I mean to say is that because air is less dense at higher altitudes, we have lower volumes of oxygen or lower volumes of air. Versus what we have here on the sea level, on surface level, we have a lot more volume, a lot more dense air, and more air molecules that we're able to use. So that's what they mean by that. And that's really what causes hypoxia, the lack of volume of air and volume of oxygen at high altitudes. So moving on, we're going to talk about hypemic hypoxia. This occurs when the blood is not able to take up and transport sufficient oxygen to the cells in the body, not enough blood. Now, some possible causes could be whether you're experiencing severe bleeding. A good example of this would be if you're donating blood. If you're donating blood, you do get lightheaded. Some people even pass out. And that's why it's a lack of blood. It's a lack of blood going from your heart and from your body in general up to your brain, and that's why you get lightheaded. So carbon monoxide poisoning can also affect or be result in hypemic hypoxia, and that's because the carbon monoxide molecules actually attach to your blood cells, replacing the oxygen and not allowing you to get that supply of oxygen to your brain. So that would be hypemic hypoxia. Now moving on, we're going to talk about stagnant hypoxia, and this is going to be a little bit more common in your everyday flying, especially if you're doing flight training. So stagnant means not flowing. Stagnant hypoxia results when oxygen-rich blood in the lungs isn't moving to the tissue that need it. Now when I think about this, I think about the UFC headlock. Submissions are performed by restricting the blood to the head, not choking them out actually by grabbing them by the throat and choking them, but rather they're actually squeezing on your arteries on the side of your neck, which are not allowing you to, get your blood flow from your heart and your body to your brain, which is why, when you get in a chokehold, they pass you out by cutting your blood circulation. So that's what stagnant hypoxia is. In a pilot situation, when you're doing flight training, when you're doing steep turns multiple times, maybe 3 or 4 times, you're practicing these steep turns, you're going to be pulling G's. You're going to be pulling maybe 2 G's, or maybe even three or more G's, depending on, your level of bank. So if you're doing 3 or 4 steep turns, you might start to feel lightheaded because, you're feeling like you're 2 or 3 times your own weight, and so that would be what stagnant hypoxia is. Maybe to not to an extreme level if you're just doing a couple of steep turns, but for fighter pilots who are pulling excessive G's, maybe 8 or 9 G's, then that's why they wear G suits, so that they don't suffer from stagnant hypoxia. So lastly, we're going to talk about histotoxic hypoxia. And so histo refers to tissues and cells, and toxic means poison. So some of the things that could affect you or be a factor in histotoxic hypoxia would be drinking alcohol, using drugs, medications that would affect your blood's ability to carry oxygen to the brain. Now, drinking an ounce of alcohol is equivalent to an additional 2,000 feet of altitude. So that comes to show how alcohol will affect your ability to carry oxygen to your blood. Some common symptoms of hypoxia would be a headache, decreased reaction time, impairment, judgment, euphoria, visual impairment, drowsiness, lightheaded or dizzy sensation, tingling in fingers or toes, numbness, and having a false sense of security, which is what euphoria is. Now, this kind of sounds similar to what some people do on a regular basis, which is smoking, whether it's smoking cigarettes, getting that nicotine high, or smoking any other substance such as marijuana, THC. It's kind of similar to what hypoxic symptoms are. Euphoria, having a false sense of security, feeling carefree, decreased reaction time, drowsiness or numbness. Those are all some of the things that you experience when you smoke. So it makes sense. When you're smoking, you're actually you're actually experiencing hypoxia, and that's why you get a little lightheaded, because you're replacing the oxygen with something else. So lastly, we're just going to talk about useful consciousness, and this is the amount of time that you have at different altitudes. In the case that unfortunately the aircraft suffered cabin depressurization, and so at 20,000 feet you'd have about 30 minutes of consciousness. At 30,000 feet you'd have 1 to 2 minutes of consciousness. At 35,000 feet you'd have 30 to 60 seconds. At 45,000 feet you'd have 9 to 15 seconds. So if you experience an in-flight emergency like that, above, let's say 35,000 feet, you'd have less than 60 seconds to actually react, declare an emergency, and go into an emergency descent to, make use of your useful consciousness so that you can, get out of that situation and get down to a lower altitude with a higher pressure, allowing you to actually breathe and get the oxygen supply that you need. So, in review, we talked about what hypoxia is. We talked about the 4 types and why it's important, and that real life situation of what can happen if you do experience hypoxia. So in the next video, we're going to talk about more aeromedical factors. Hopefully this video was of value to you and you're able to explain and recognize what type of hypoxia you or your passengers may be experiencing. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.